Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. This is Funny Wine Girl, Janine Luby, and I am super excited about this week's episode because it's about one of my favorite topics, Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I live and have lived all my life except for living in State College when I went to Penn State, and The Office. So I guess I don't know if this is kind of meta. I'm never really sure if I know how to use that term meta. So I'm recording this in my hometown of Scranton, and I'm going to be talking to someone who was basically very instrumental, he and another person, getting the Office convention in town, which got us quite a bit of attention from outside the area, which is awesome because I love to see my hometown thrive. I like to include, although I've gotten away from it, I will tell you, it is morning. So for those of you who are just listening, you won't get to see this. But for those of you watching the video, I have my Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl mug. And it says, if it's morning, this must be coffee. And I will tell you it is, because I'm too old to be drinking in the morning. I wait till at least 10 or 11 normally, but no, I can only do that on like weekends and vacations. So anyway, I like to include a little fact about wine. So I will tell you that the Scranton area does have a decent amount of wineries. In Scranton proper, Lucci Family Wine Cellars is in the west part of Scranton. And then we have not too many that are right in Scranton, but we have many that are, throughout if you ever wanted to come here and do a wine tour. One of my favorites, and probably the biggest in the area, is Malatessi's, which is just about 10, 15 minutes outside of Scranton, which is a good one. And let's face it, if you are a fan of The Office, you are probably going to be in search of that wine that gives a lovely sort of oaky afterbirth, as Michael Scott told us the one day at his dinner party. Well, I will stop talking now because I could do that forever. And I would like to introduce you to this week's guest, Tim Holmes, who I have known since I was a wee one, and we went to the same church in Scranton. Our fathers worked together at the Scranton Times. I'm sorry, I forget it's changed names a few times. And I actually worked for Tim, who was my boss, at a small community newspaper that was part of the Times Shamrock newspaper group. So good morning and welcome, Tim.
Hey, Janine. So good to see you again.
It is great to see you. And yes, I've known you through the years. And I should say, Tim is from one of ththose large, Jim Gaffigan would appreciate this, large Catholic families. I think they started renaming them. There's a Tim too, isn't there, in your family? No,
Yeah,
just
we got
kidding.
a couple. We got a couple. Funny you mentioned Jim Gaffigan. He and I were born the very same day.
Really?
7766. Funny little fact
Wow.
right there. Yeah,
Okay. So you guys have a couple things in common then.
we do indeed.
So Tim and I have known each other through the years, and you could probably say, well, doesn't everybody know each other in Scranton? And that's kind of true, but kind of not. It's big enough where you don't run into people every single day, and you don't have to know their business, although we do, let's face it. But Tim and I worked together for a while, and I had a great time. He was a great boss. But I don't even know, Tim will tell us the details. He was instrumental in bringing amazing events to Scranton that were great for those of us who live here, businesses here, and the people of Scranton. So, Tim, why don't you tell us maybe a little bit about how the Office convention and all those cool events got started? And maybe you could even share with us some details of the cool folks that you got to meet, because you got to hang with the actual cast, which is pretty awesome.
So yeah, I did indeed. So yes, thank you so much for having me here. This is a great honor. Thank you very much. So yeah, if we go back to you when you and I were working together, as you mentioned, we worked with the community newspaper group at a little paper called The Advantage in Alphen, PA, which is just a little outside of Scranton. When I had moved back downtown to work inside the Scranton Times proper building, that was part of the Times Shamrock family, the paper we worked with. When I came downtown, I became a little more involved with marketing and events and running the local entertainment newspaper, which was called Electric City. So just, having a natural connection to events in the area because I was, helping to, manage this entertainment property, we began to, start doing a lot of events around town. That began with something that had already begun before I started at Electric City. It was called their Best Of Party, where it would basically be, once a year we do a survey and find out who has the best pizza, the best wings, the best drinks, and all that fun stuff. And then we would have a celebration of Scranton and basically all the best things about Scranton. So they just became these awesome, huge events. And then eventually we started doing other events that would help to raise funds for local nonprofits. One of the more memorable ones, was a thing called a rooftop party. We had a new parking garage open in downtown Scranton, which is a big deal for Scranton. So in order to christen that new garage, we decided to have a party up there, hoping to get a couple hundred people to raise money for the Albright Memorial Library. Turns out about 15 to 1,700 people showed up for this thing. And halfway through the party, we literally had to get the architect of the garage on the phone to see if it would hold all of us people in this garage, because it was just so jam-packed. They said we had nothing to
Classic
fear.
Scranton, Tim. Classic Scranton.
A party like that in Scranton is, with a small population of about 72,000, to get 1,500 people to show up to anything. We had also owned entertainment publications in Baltimore and Orlando, big cities like that. They had a very hard time, throwing parties where 1,500 people would show up. So, but Scranton's very well connected, and when you do something cool, people respond. And that's how I really kind of cut my teeth on doing the events. And then we started doing things like Oktoberfest events and wine festivals, as you may remember those. They still happen to this very day. I'm no longer running them, but we most certainly started them. And we were doing it through the Scranton Times, because we were basically the publicity partner of the event. And then, these things became large events. So now to fast forward to the office convention. So the office convention was a huge event. We hosted it in October of 2007. So it was maybe about the third season, kind of into the third season. They were beginning to basically film their fourth season. Back in the second season, the idea of doing something like this in Scranton kind of bubbled up. So a local architect named Michelle Dempsey, who had moved out of the city for a while and came back and shared the same love for the city that you and I share. She just, she began to recognize that, we all began to recognize that all of a sudden we'd start seeing license plates from the Carolinas driving around Scranton, and it was just, that's unusual for us. A lot of them drive on 81 and blow by Scranton, but they started getting off the exit and kind of coming into town. So, she just felt there was a need to do something to kind of pull it together. And she was in planning for quite a bit. I did not know Michelle Dempsey at the time. And then, so I was very good friends, and still am very good friends with Sarah Hailstone. She was the linchpin who tied it all together. So Sarah had worked with the city of Scranton at the time. She was the director of economic development. And she was also instrumental in helping a lot of these events get off the ground, the other events. And she was the one who, with Chris Doherty, the mayor, the mayor really wanted something to happen. And the mayor said, what is it going to take to get this thing off the ground? And Sarah basically said, I just need to get Michelle Dempsey and Tim Holmes together and try to make this whole thing happen. So hence, that's what we did. So we started planning, we met one another, and the three of us basically sat down, and Michelle and I kind of took charge of it. Both of us took different roles on it, where I was kind of organizing the city and coordinating the infrastructure for a huge event here. Michelle was, doing what she can to make the connections and the contacts with NBC, Universal, and everything on the other side. Long story short, ultimately, we narrowed down our idea. Originally, Michelle had sent out a 30-page document to them saying all these cool things we're going to do. And I think it was just overwhelming for them. So basically, I took that, narrowed it down to a single page letter that we sent. We were able to get right onto Greg Daniels' desk. And we got that connection through Michelle having a cousin who worked in New York City, who knew somebody at NBC Universal, and they connected us with somebody else. It's always a Scranton connection.
Always.
who got us to, people at Universal, NBC Universal PR, who was able to get this letter on to Greg Daniels' desk. So Greg Daniels is the guru. He's the god who created the American version of The Office. We'll explain a lot more. You can listen to Brian's podcast as to how he created all that. But basically, the letter we sent said that fans of The Office are unique. It's not like just a typical sitcom that people just watch and they move on to the next sitcom. They really began to embrace the show, the characters, and we had believed at this point Scranton was becoming a character almost in the show. And so we said, fans of The Office need to unite and share this kindred spirit. much like a Star Trek convention and everything that was popular at the time. And we said, this is not something that should happen in LA or in New York. It needs to happen in Scranton. So right after that, we get word from Greg Daniels' people that he actually got a kick out of the concept. He felt it played well with the sensibilities of the show to do something like this. Doing a mockumentary, anything that added to the realism, he felt would help the show, which is pretty awesome. So next thing you know, we begin conversations about doing this. So we finally make a connection basically in about May of that year. You may remember the first visit we had from the office was Rainn Wilson. Dwight came to town. He came into town, maybe season 2, maybe around 2006. Showed up at the mall. This is pre-Juno, but there was 2,500 people outside, just waiting in line to see.
Tim, I could kick myself for not going to that because I was watching the show, but I don't know if I just didn't think it was a big deal. I could kick myself now. I would love to have met him.
Yeah, a lot of people say that, but it was a madhouse. And I will tell you, it was difficult to sit down and chat with him when there's 2,500 people standing in line. So it was a kind of a grip and grin situation. But nonetheless, it kind of opened the door to, creating a connection. The following May, we got Brian and Angela to come to town. So this would be Brian Baumgartner, Kevin on The Office, and Angela Kinsey, who plays Angela on the show. The two of them came in May of that year. And basically, we just built a little event around it. We had already had a rooftop party planned, so we kind of did that. So we had them bartending at this rooftop party. It also, being in May, it also happened to be around the time of the University of Scranton's graduation. So we basically surprised the graduation party by showing up with Brian and Angela and had them like inside, like they were having like a parents' night or something like the week before. So they all went crazy. We also had them staying at the Radisson. So there's weddings every weekend at the Radisson. So we actually surprised the bride and groom by showing up in the middle of their wedding. Like, it just was a magical weekend. And Brian and Angela had the absolute time of their lives. And they then went back to the rest of the cast and said, hey, listen, it's just awesome in Scranton. You gotta go. So
can I ask you, Tim, are they as nice as they seem? Just because I do listen to the Office Ladies podcast. Yeah. I listen to Brian Baumgartner's podcast, and I know he's been here numerous times. They seem to genuinely get a kick out of being here and appreciate the fans.
They really do. They love the fans. They love every bit about it. They love visiting Scranton. It's a lot of work for them because they're busy folks, but it is not an act. They just absolutely embrace it. Here's just something for you to consider, and it's something that really kind of hit us early days. These people were not rock stars prior to the show. So they absolutely credit the show with what they are today. So, that's very near and dear to the heart. So that's, it kind of, it's not something you could easily brush off. There's somebody who would go to lunch out in LA and, you're invisible when George Clooney's on the other side of the room. So yeah. When they came to Scranton, they were rock stars. And it's really hard to replicate that anywhere. And for that reason, they just absolutely loved it. But they also knew they were making people happy. The smiles on people's faces and everything was just magnificent. So, that's when we began, just as we have them kind of going around Scranton, it was just a lot of stick and move things, not a lot of like sitting down and filling out autographs, because we immediately recognized it's really not the best way to meet as many people as possible, and Brian himself is like, do you really want to spend the 3 seconds that you got with me looking at the top of my head, or can we just make it? So that's why, even on that first visit, after we had hit the University of Scranton, had the rooftop party, we also brought them to a couple of the local bars, and Bog being one of their favorites, going to the Bog. He got to meet Brian Craig, which, as you know, is near and dear to everyone's heart. He had passed away last year, but just the sweetest man on earth. And when they got to meet him and we had him behind that bar, he just fell in love with him. And it broke his heart when he had heard about Brian Craig. It's just, they created real connections here, which is amazing. So this is May of 2007. We are building this infrastructure for a 3-day weekend here in Scranton, and we start, getting word out. I fortunately had people working with me at Electric City who were they were fans of the show, and they kind of understood how to promote and build websites and all that other stuff. So guys like Matt Smith and Eric Toffey and Tucker Hodges and all these guys that you may remember, those guys
Yep.
that helped us creating, you know, the website and getting word out about this whole thing. So we started pushing out the info for basically the structure of the weekend. And we brought in partners like the University of Scranton, the city of Scranton, the county, Lackawanna County, we got the Chamber of Commerce, we got, you know, all these local partners together to help us at least build a little bit of a fund, along with the Times Tribune, where I was working, you know, in Electric City, to create this partnership where we want to prepare ourselves on this side in order to tell them out there we're ready to bring them here and to protect them, and it would be a safe atmosphere and everything like that. So that's all stuff you have to consider for them. So we pull it all together. We go the entire summer promoting this thing. We're selling tickets for next to nothing because we're setting it up as a not-for-profit thing, you know, so we're trying to keep it as reasonable as possible for the fans, which is part of the thing NBC liked the most about it. It wasn't some kind of for-profit outside event organization. The fact that it was homegrown and it was local people who were doing this thing, NBC and the show really loved. So, you know, so we get the whole thing pulled together. We have a great lineup with what we're going to be doing for the weekend. And we, however, did not get a single cast member to commit to coming to Scranton until September 25th of that.
Wow.
We were 4 weeks. We were in constant contact with each of them. You know, we were kind of, it was just kind of a weird setup. We were kind of negotiating individually with, you know, who gets so much money for you know, for an appearance fee and all that other kind of stuff. So we had to kind of have this kind of blanket fee, but some are bigger stars than others and all that other stuff. So dancing through all that, none of us had experience with that kind of stuff, but Michelle Dempsey kind of worked that side of things while I was organizing all the others. You know, ultimately, all the while we had Brian on the inside who, you know, we would stay in touch with, and he's like, people are coming, you know, but we would not announce anything until we knew for sure. And then it wasn't until like literally 4 weeks out, September 25th, and Michelle is talking to Brian the one day, and he's like, Michelle, I'm sorry to tell you, but I can only get like 15 to come. I always remember Matt Smith, who was editor of Electric City at the time, just said it was an embarrassment of riches. So none of the Fab Four came. So Krasinski, Carell, Jenna Fisher, and Rainn Wilson couldn't make it, all for different reasons. It wasn't, you know, a reason, you know, that they didn't want to go. They were all tied up. But the rest of the ensemble cast came. Also, along with them, 12 of the writers came into town. I believe 12, possibly 13, including BJ Novak, who, you know, was becoming a star himself, you know, as Ryan on the show. He wanted to be and Mindy Kaling as well, both of whom.
Was Mindy here that weekend?
Mindy was
she there?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, I only went to, well, I was doing improv at the time with Chris Barnes had the Comedy Dojo back then. Right. And I got to meet Angela, Oscar, and Kate, who played Kate Meredith. Flannery. Kate Flannery, right. They were all in by the Radisson, and I got to meet them, and they were all super. I remember the three of them being super nice, but I mean, that was my extent of it. And again, I say I could kick myself, but again, I live here, I watch the show, and I just did not take advantage of all the awesome stuff that was taking place, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's funny how you know, people look back and they wonder why they didn't make it, but you know, it's just one of those things. You know, it's the funny thing is, you know, I had gone on to do tours for 7 years after that until we did the wrap party, and nobody in Scranton knew I was doing it. But the minute we put something online and said we're doing it, I'd fill a bus with 50 people like overnight. And it's people from Toronto and, you know, the UK and from Australia. People would come to, just because the love of the office was just so great. And it was just this kitschy thing to go visit, you know, a little town like Scranton and be able to say, you know, none of my buddies visited that place, but I did. So yeah, when you're talking like people like Oscar Nunez and Kate Flannery, we've become very good friends with those folks. So we've had them back before. Oscar had a buddy who lived in Music, PA, you know, so he had his family over, like when he was in for the convention, you know, and you know, Kate Flannery's family is from Philadelphia. Her dad owned
right. They have a bar, right? Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, she used it as an opportunity to come, you know, to the East Coast and visit with Dad. So it just wound up, it was a magical weekend. It kicked off on a Friday, and it was a 3-day worth of events. Kicking off at the University of Scranton. Al Roker got wind about a week before that it was happening, or at least NBC got wind of it. So they sent Al Roker to do the weather from Scranton that Friday morning. And basically, it was a madness. So we had about 4,000 University of Scranton kids stayed up all night Thursday night before and camped out. So by 7 a.m., that Friday morning, we went nationwide, and we had basically the whole ensemble cast of The Office came out basically 3 at a time and did segments with Al Roker while the kids were going crazy. Wound up being a beautiful weekend weather-wise, but all the events, it was never more than 2,000 or 3,000 people could fit into the venues that we had. So we had a cast Q&A at the University of Scranton and the Long Center that was, maybe 3,500 people could fit in there. So we sold out on those. We did another one, a writer's block, which was just one of the most special things ever. That was at the Cultural Center on that Sunday, which was just amazing. So we had just the writers and Greg Daniels speaking about their influences and their inspirations behind each show. And on Saturday night, we had a thing at the CYC. It was like a concert, basically. Again, a week before the show, we got word from the guy who actually did the theme song. His name is Bob Thiel. He didn't write it, but he actually recorded it. So he's also in the show where if you would see something like Scrantonicity or one of these like little bands at something, Bob Thiel would always be in the band. So he's just friends with Greg Daniels and everybody who does it. So once I got in touch, they connected me with him, and I'm like, oh yeah, man, we'd love to have you. So we built this whole event around Bob Thiel and basically Scrantonicity. But then we had Melora Hardin up there singing, and Craig Robinson, and all of them are talented as can be. So, Kate Flannery, sings like a songbird. It's just beautiful. And they all got up on stage, and it was just absolutely amazing. So just an extraordinary weekend. But as we're leaving town, the Sunday, as we're kind of cleaning things up after this writer's block, everybody is heading in different directions. Oh, one of the most special parts of the entire weekend is the 12 writers that came. Greg Daniels insisted they all land in New York City. So we had people landing in Philly and Avoca, and they were just all over, just trying to all kind of piece them all together with transportation and everything, which was a nightmare. It was a crazy weekend, but it's that Sunday. Greg Daniels, everybody else has left. He was catching a later flight than most. So he and Jen Zalata wanted to go to Cooper's to have a late lunch. And he's like, can you just tell me where it is? He was renting a caravan, and he was going to drive over himself. I'm like, I have a million things to do to clean up shop and everything. I'm like, let me take you over there. I'll get you there. It's too hard to explain, and we'll take it from there. So Chrissy got in our car behind us, and I drove his little caravan over to Cooper's. But I got to sit down and have lunch with Greg Daniels and Jen Zalata, which is just extraordinary. So, and he was just so blown away with Cooper's. He is just the sweetest man on earth. I had a lot of time talking to him over the weekend as well, but we really just got to know one another. And, we just got to plant the seed to him, and we just said, listen, this was, an awesome weekend. Just it's very difficult to pull it all together, every year or something like that. I said, but, we knew at that time that at the end of each season, they would have a wrap party. And it would always be on the Santa Monica Pier or something like that. So I basically just said, if you're having a wrap party, if the show should ever come to an end, and we hope it never does, but if it does, can we just host a wrap party here? And it stuck in his head. So as he got close to that 9th season, when he knew that they were going to be wrapping things up, we laid the groundwork. We had already laid the groundwork for a wrap party, which was just extraordinary. So that was May of 2013.
I remember that. Yeah.
So that was everybody, Krasinski, Carell, all those guys. And Carell, I don't know if you remember, but that was a secret.
I do remember people went, I just need someone to kick me in the ass throughout this whole thing, because I did not do enough. I remember there was a parade in the daytime. I did not go to that, but I did go to the stadium in Music where they were bringing everyone out. And I know the crowd lost their stuff when Carell came out, because that was a surprise and people went nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to your listeners out there, if you want to hear, just Google Steve Carell in Scranton. There's probably 100 links that you could read to, because it was kind of early days with cell phones and everybody recorded it. But you could hear, a couple in particular that have 1 million views are, you could hear them saying, we kind of had Greg Daniels and I had set up this little thing. I didn't even tell my wife he was coming. So it was like legitimately the cast members didn't know he was coming. We had done the parade during the day. And I told him that, I told Steve Burgess, who was a producer at the time, I just basically said, we can't protect him. So he's not invited to come till after 5 o'clock. So basically we had set that up. We had this awesome parade. It was hard enough to, protect Jim and Pam out there. So we get down, have this great little concert in downtown Scranton, and then basically we go up, to PNC Field, but we all went back to the Radisson, the cast, and we have them all in this like hospitality suite on the second floor, like overlooking the the depth. So we have them there, and I had already, while they were up, getting changed and getting ready for the night before, that's when we had Steve come rolling in, and we snuck him in through the back door. Nobody saw him coming in. Got him up, and then we brought him down to the hospitality suite. I could see the only people like Rainn Wilson, Krasinski, Brian knew he was coming, but Phyllis and Kate and everybody lost their minds when they saw him walk into their own hospitality suite. So it was a surprise for them. It was a surprise for everybody who was organizing the thing with me. But we absolutely wanted to keep it that way, because if you remember the last show, it was a surprise that he even showed up on the last episode.
Yeah.
So it was kind of playing with all of that as well. So, we get up to PNC Field, and but yeah, if you Google just Steve Carell and Scranton, it sounded like a jet taking off, because Greg Daniels had us, Michelle and I, introduce everybody. So we kind of went through one by one and introduced the entire cast. And then Greg Daniels and I did this little bit where, we're like, hey, there's an extra chair here, and Greg's like, what do we got this extra chair here for, Tim? And then I was supposed to say the guy who plays Michael Scott, Steve Carell. I never even got Steve Carell out of my mouth. Michael Scott, and the place lost it. It was just, and I was quoted in my own paper as saying, do not buy a ticket to see Steve Carell. He is not coming. They really, really wanted to keep it a surprise. So it was pretty awesome that we were able to pull it off. Any surprises in an age of cell phones is just extraordinary. So we pulled it off.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, that just
you certainly did.
Yeah, it's the convention set the stage for the rap party. That was much more condensed. We did not do a 3-day nightmarish weekend for me. It was a 1-day.
A lot of work.
It was awful. I lost like 17 pounds, and I didn't have it to lose then, in 2007. This was just a compressed day, 1 day. That's the way we sold it to them, and said, listen, you come in, you don't even have to come Friday night if you don't want to. Come Saturday, and you're gone Sunday morning. And it's, and they liked that idea. So it was a real hit and run thing, but there was no signing autographs, nothing like that. It was just big, broad, saying hello to 20,000 people going to the streets of Scranton, and then saying hello to, there was maybe only 7,000 people at the stadium, and we were selling tickets for $7, and the entire cast was there. So every one of my buddies who didn't show are all like, why didn't you know he's coming? And I'm like, doesn't matter. The people who were there were the fans of the ensemble cast, and that's what it was for. And we just were thrilled that it worked out that way.
Okay, so Tim, that's okay. So tell me, can you give us any juicy details? Are there any divas in the group? I know you won't say. Was everyone really nice though? They all seem to be. I mean, I think they'd have to be mingling with the fans, but sure. I'm sure. Well, you're not going to tell us, right? If someone was a little diva-ish.
I won't tell you about any divas, but I could tell you just about a couple experiences, one of which is always my favorite to tell. So, it truly is, the fact that Scranton was such a big deal in this show, and this show was such a big deal in making them all basically stars. There's a very deep connection. So to them, they would go into show, and we had learned this early on that Brian and Angela told us that when they're, having their coffee in the morning and getting ready to go out, they would all say to one another, and the writers, they'd say, let's get our Scranton on. And they'd go out and start shooting the show. So for them, it was a very real thing to be able to, live and touch and feel Scranton. So one of the most special experiences, though, was that office convention moment with Al Roker at 7 a.m. the night before, so a Thursday night when they all arrived. Not all of them arrived, many of them arrived that Thursday night. Craig Robinson's birthday was that Thursday night before, we went live with Al Roker at 6 or 7 in the morning. So he's like, we're going out. So he wanted to go to Whistles, if you remember Whistles at the time.
Yes.
He like blows and whistles. He's up singing karaoke. It was just a wild, wild night. So anybody who happened to be at Whistles that night, and word got out really fast, so the place loaded up really, really fast. But it was just a wild night Thursday. So we're all like barely getting to the University of Scranton on time. So we get everybody in there. So the first group of people, one of the first, Phyllis is part of the first group we're bringing out there. That week she had fallen and sprained her ankle or something. So she's like got a cane, and she's got like her foot is wrapped up and everything. So we get her to like basically by the library. We have them in this kind of, backstage area where we're getting them prepped after we bring the limos around so the kids aren't attacking them while they're getting out. So we had that all mapped out. So we're ready to come out this door. We're 100 feet away from Al Roker, and we have this whole thing cordoned off with 4,000 kids. And they've all seen Al Roker, so I've already had a blast with that. And the second I open the door and I start pulling Phyllis out of the door, she's coming out first, and she has her purse on her like wrist, and she's carrying this cane. And then all of a sudden, we're like going live at like 17 seconds, and she starts digging in her purse for a camera because she's like, I want to take a picture for my mother. I'm like, give me the camera. You got to get out here. So I grab the camera out of her hand, bring her out, and the kids went crazy. Like, again, you could hear it was like an airplane taking off. Her eyes swelled up immediately, and she starts bawling and crying. She had no idea what to expect. Like, she was not with us at Whistles the night before, so she hadn't experienced it, just how wild it was going to be. So she begins, and she couldn't even control herself. So I was taking her pictures. I got her out there, but she, as we said, she's a sweetheart of a girl, and that's. But they all were. Every one of them were just fantastic to work with. Ed Helms, who could not make it for the wrap party, he was like hosting Saturday Night Live like that day, back in May of 2013. So he couldn't make, but he was there in 2007. It's like a brand new character. They had just unveiled the whole Andy thing. He was playing a banjo at the bar. Like, this is pre-Hangover, so nobody in the world knew who this guy was. Like, like these special experiences were just extraordinary. But since then, I've stayed in touch with a pretty good handful of them. Brian in particular. Andy Buckley is another one of our favorites. So he played David Wallace. And
I was going to ask you about him because I know you guys, I don't know, there was pictures you're riding with him around town, and I love his story that he was actually a financial planner or something.
He worked with Merrill Lynch. So he was basically a part-time actor. Always wanted to be an actor, but super sharp guy, went to Stanford, played golf, on the Stanford team. That's where Tiger Woods played golf, by the way.
Wow.
You need to know how to play golf if you're playing golf there. Super sharp guy, but a lovely guy. He's like my age, right? So it's 2 weeks before the convention. It's similar to this Bob Thiel situation with getting the song, the theme guy there. But I get a call, middle of the afternoon. I'm at the Scranton Times, and it is just a nightmare. We're already upside down on our budget, with what it's costing to kind of get everything all set up and everything. And so I get a call, and it's Andy Buckley's on the phone, and he's like, hey, I'm Andy Buckley. And I'm like, at this point, I'm too busy to even watch the show. So I haven't even seen an episode with him in it yet. And I'm like, well, who are you? Who are you in the show? We already have everybody coming. And I'm like, we're already out of money. And he's like, I just want to be able to come and, and see it and everything like that. And he's like, I'm like Michael's boss at corporate and everything like that. And I'm like, I just don't know if we have any money to do that. And he's like, I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. I know you're flying everybody out first class. He's like, but if you fly me out coach and give me the difference in cash, I can convince my wife that you actually want me there. And the second he said that, I came home that night and told Chrissy, I'm like, I love this man. Like, he is just the funniest guy. So when he came for the convention, he was like, a lot of them were skittish because it was crazy. It was very rowdy, but he was one of those guys who would just jump in the crowd and just hugs and kisses and signing things and patting backs and kissing babies. He's just an awesome guy. So he just, he also has family on the East Coast. So we've had him here probably a half a dozen times, either for parades or whatever, and we just bring him up. But he too, just the experience of coming here was amazing. So I have since gone to LA a couple times. One time where I was able to bring my whole family out to be on it was like 2010. They invited Michelle and I to come out and they basically rolled the red carpet for us. Like we were their guest for the entire day, like on the set there for 8 hours. Like Steve Carell had to get behind me in line at lunch. Like it was
Oh
just
man.
so we really got the royal treatment out there because, we really took good care of them when they were out here. But just, when I would go out to LA, Buckley's like, you're staying at my house, buddy. And then, and the same thing, he'll stay at my house when he comes to Scranton. So it's pretty funny, super, super nice people.
He seems awesome. I love his character. And he went on to do a show. I can't think of the name of it now, but on Bravo, with him and this other woman. And it was only on a season, but I watched it. It was a comedy. It was good. But he
Yeah.
seems like a really down to earth kind of cool guy. And I love the fact that he had a day job in finance and there he is. Like that. I think that was awesome. Yeah.
It's how he got cast. So one of the big casting, Allison Jones was like one of their main casting people. And it's just somebody he would know, it's a small circle of people out there in LA. Well, it's a big circle, but it's people know who's who, right? So, but he's right in the right age group and everything, but he worked at Merrill Lynch. So he would be at this farmer's market, and the one day he runs into Allison Jones and she's like, you know what? I might have something for you with this kind of new show. She's like, let me talk it up and everything. And she'll see, winds up, casting him for this role that they thought was just going to be kind of a one and done thing. But he would literally leave his Merrill Lynch office in his Merrill Lynch suit. And they're like, you don't even have to go to wardrobe. You're good like that. Just jump in the seat right now. And he literally went right from work to sitting down and banging out a few lines and doing it. What he'll always say, and it certainly seems that way to me, like, we love the character. And the one thing I always say about that David Wallace character is, Michael is such an outrageous character that somehow David Wallace always made it seem real. And that was their big thing. And that's why Scranton, they like to use so many specific things with Scranton. But the David Wallace character would have these moments where they'd be like, why do you keep that guy there? And he'd be like, I know it's a little bit crazy, but look at those sales numbers. He's like, so he would back it up with something like that. And it always made it seem not as outrageous that you had this guy who's just this sweetheart of a guy in New York who just wouldn't, fire Michael Scott. And so they wound up, because Andy was in town and he got to know the writers a little bit better. They began to write him in the show a little bit more for Scranton as well. We fully believe after, season 4, it just became more of a Scranton show because they, the Chili's episode from way back when where they would, that was like basically, the kind of thing that would happen back then, but no longer would that happen, like moving forward,
Yeah, yeah, because we know we had a Chili's, but it was actually in Wilkes-Barre, not in Scranton. And we don't have a Hooters, that's for darn sure.
Or a Benihana. So
yeah, or a Benihana, sure.
Right. So we, when we did the tour for a bunch of years, we would kind of clarify that for people and explain, why Greg Daniels picked Scranton. If you want to talk about that, I could say that part. I don't know if all your listeners know that part, but we were just very fortunate. We're probably running out of time now.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all these details. And I mean, wow, what an amazing experience it's been for you. Like just to spend time with these people alone and even form friendships is awesome. But I want to ask you, and because I actually do believe in Scranton, long before people, sometimes I kind of get a little snit because I'm like, okay, people, you could have loved the city before the office. But I mean, I've defended the city for the longest time. I remember going away to Penn State and people would drive, who drove by on 81 are like, oh, that's an armpit. I'm like, any place could seem like an armpit or not cool to people if they don't get to know it, right? There are ups and downs of every place. I've lived here my whole life, except going away to Penn State to live for school. I think there are great people here. I think there's beautiful scenery here. I think we have amazing artists and business people and just a wonderful community. I want to ask you your favorite parts about the city and living here, but I also want to ask you what you think the show has done for the city.
Sure. So a few things with that. So I too am a huge fan of Scranton, have always been. Being one of 10, our family was very similar to the typical, percentage of what would happen with people who would stay in Scranton and those who would leave. And basically half of the 10 of my family left Scranton. They're in Boston, DC, Philadelphia. That's pretty typically Scranton. About half the young people leave town. I've got 2 children. Our son lives in Philly, and our daughter Emily is still here. So there was always this feeling that it was like a failure to stay behind, and we knew better. Just those of us who stayed behind. It's a special place to live. Like, the quality of life is extraordinary. Greg Daniels himself, when they would ask him the question at one of these writers' blocks, like, how do you replicate Scranton with that 5K, and you got all these palm trees that they're running under? And he's like, we got to a point where it was just hard to totally just try to completely replicate an outdoor site. He's like, because look at these mountains. He's like, it's so lush and green and beautiful. He's like, we're filming in Van Nuys, California. You want to see an armpit? Go there. It's all industrial parks. It's awful. And, and that's why he's just like, we could never replicate, but he's, they're asking it like a shot against Scranton. And he's like, it's beautiful here. I can never replicate this. But yeah, just the fact that the people are awesome, having a huge family, it's great that we're always close and we have events and all that kind of stuff. But just, you could really succeed here. The thing we always, would talk about with the Chamber of Commerce and everything, we're 2 hours from New York, Philadelphia, a couple hours from DC, just being able to live in a place like this. We could legitimately go to a Broadway show and be back, that night. I could go see a Giants game. I could see a Phillies game. You could do all that and be back in no time. So you get kind of that big city benefit, but I have deer walking around my yard right now. It's extraordinary. So that is, that's kind of my soapbox about that. So what do I think the show has done for Scranton? Let's go back to the office convention 2007, pre-office convention. And I don't want to overstate what we did, but I'm here to tell you, you remember that whenever the Washington Post would write about Scranton, it would be that hard scrabble, rust belty town, and we deserved that because at the turn of the century, the year 1900, the turn of the 20th century, Scranton had the highest per capita income in the nation because all the coal barons lived right here. And it was a small town. It's only 70,000 people. We're banging out anthracite coal that is fueling the Industrial Revolution. So Scranton had an extraordinary past. So almost anything is going to be a little bit of a letdown. And most certainly in the 50s and the 60s, when the coal mines are shutting down and everything else, iron is, it was all dying, So my uncles, my mother's family, she's one of 8. All of her brothers and sisters moved to Delaware. Same year that Joe Biden left Scranton, like 1955. There was no jobs. So it was well-deserved, the knock that was on us. But after the convention, now Scranton had already been having a little bit of a renaissance. And, unfortunately, it's people, like your generation of mine that were, doing what we can to kind of, it was a whole new economy and everything. So there was, we kind of fit into it a little bit better. But the headlines from our office convention were extraordinary. We had 200 press outlets showed up just because every social editor, in any paper all wanted to go to this thing. And we were in the China Times. I'm telling you, it was just extraordinary. University of Scranton helped to coordinate all that part for us. But the Philly Inquirer gave our favorite headline of all time. It was Saturday morning, so it was after the Friday thing. We hadn't even done the whole Q&A or anything like that. But they said that Scranton had gone from cold to cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's extraordinary. So you, as a Chamber of Commerce, can do all you want. You can stand on your head and spend $5 billion to try to turn perception like that. But this show has absolutely turned the perception. So when you now take a trip somewhere and you're in Chicago and you happen to be sitting at a bar with somebody and you say you're from Scranton, they lose their mind and they're like, oh my, that's the home of the office. It's so hard to put a dollar value on it because it's hard to say that we've really cashed in on that. We often say love to see more, small, middle-sized companies moving to Scranton and creating jobs here because do it for your employees. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to work. Yes. You're not commuting for 4 hours to get somewhere. It's wonderful here. So hopefully that message begins to get out. And there's a reason why the most brilliant guy in Hollywood, he looked at a map of the United States and he was deciding, where is my satellite branch going to go? And he chose Scranton. And it's, something we'll be forever grateful for. And so, yeah, we all have a shrine to Greg Daniels, in our homes because he's the guy who decided, and we love him for it. But it really has changed the perception of Scranton. You talk to a kid today who's 15, 20 years old, they're huge fans of the show. They don't even know what coal is. They wouldn't even know what hard scrabble. They just know that it's the home of this, and it's the applications at the University of Scranton more than doubled since that office convention, since 2007, every year after year after year. It's extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, and like to your point, and hopefully maybe we'll start to see it a little bit more and more. It would be great if businesses would realize it, like you said, because again, you don't have to have this huge long commute. You can take advantage of the proximity to Philly, to New York, all these cool things. We have cool things here, but if you want to get out of town and be back in town, and then kayak, like I kayak at Lackawanna State Park. You could be kayaking in the morning and then off to a Phillies game in the, you know what I mean? It's a pretty great life that we have here. So businesses out there, I know I have about a couple dozen listeners, but if you own a business, bring it here to Scranton, Pennsylvania.
So, well, actually with the new economy, with COVID forcing folks to work from home, I will say, well, I'm no longer in the newspaper business. I'm in the mortgage business. We're seeing so many more people coming back to Scranton. Kids who had left. The minute you start having kids, you want to bring them here because people are just they're bailing out of the big cities, New York and everything like that, because no longer do you have to go into the office. If you're able to work remotely, do it here. No sense in being cooped up in an apartment somewhere when you could buy, for that same rent that you're paying for an apartment in Hoboken, you can own a monster home, with land right here, and still be able to go in and do what you want to do in New York City and have dinner and come right back home, So, that new economy is already begin to, bring people back to Scranton, which is great.
Yeah. That's great to hear. And I honestly, that's another great point. Not just the businesses, but like you said, you can work remotely. So why not work here and get more for your money and enjoy seeing a deer, excuse me, in the morning in your backyard, and take a break from your work and go outside and enjoy the beauty that we have instead of traffic and smog and beeping and things like that. Yeah, definitely.
Right.
All right. Well, I know you're a busy guy. I've taken up a lot of your time this morning, and I'm super grateful for your sharing. So we talked earlier before we hit the record button. What could we expect something in the future related to The Office? Maybe.
So I will tell you, we do stay in touch with various cast members, Greg Daniels and such, and we don't try to, we'll never try to just force something and say, hey, we're gonna pick a date and you guys got to come out here. We kind of just stay in touch with them. We're coming up on a 20th anniversary of the show. There's a bunch of things that are kind of happening out there. But if you're listening to these podcasts, the Office ladies, and they're great. They take you through every episode of the show, but you'll always hear the two of them talking. Jenna or Pam and Angela have never been in Scranton together. So Angela was here for the 2007 convention, and Jenna was here for the 2013. They'd love to come together sometimes. So they're always saying, we should just show up someday and do that. They most certainly can. We always have the red carpet out for them. Brian Baumgartner on his podcast, if you want to know how the show is created and all the inspirations, it's extraordinary. It's an oral history of The Office. Give it a listen. Brian has a book coming out in November of this year. There's definitely, talk about, possibly doing something to promote that book or something to, maybe whether it's him or somebody else, but getting the entire cast together would be extraordinary. It's the logistics are extraordinary because these people just continue to become bigger and bigger rock stars, particularly as the show gets more and more popular. It is, by far the most popular show on Netflix. 7% of their downloads are The Office. You could download anything, but 7% of their downloads. It's staggering.
And now it's off Netflix, which makes me cry.
That's
but
right.
It is
so
on the Peacock. Yeah.
But now Peacock, that's why Peacock is just we've got the most popular things out there. They created an entire, basically channel over it. So now that is that's the bread and butter of theirs, and it's pulling all the other NBC shows along with it. So it just shows you just how popular it had become. So absolutely, there's a desire out there. We have no doubt people would come, but we would, the city of Scranton is always wide open for those guys if they want to come, and we'll most certainly let everybody know if something were to ever happen. But right now, we used to do tours. It's really difficult to kind of do that all the time because it's a volunteer thing and just getting people to show up and stuff. So you could just drive through town. We have little maps that you can find. The Visitors Bureau has little walking tour maps that show you where all the little properties are, Alfredo's Pizza, Cooper's, all that fun stuff that you heard about in the office. They're all real places. They're all still in business. Poor Richard's is absolutely a place you could go and get a drink and get a t-shirt. So it's all out there. So you just come on to Scranton and check it all out.
Yeah, and I have it on Instagram. I have an I Like Scranton account, so please check it out because I love promoting Scranton. And there's an awesome Dwight Schrute mural on the side of a building,
Yes.
on and on, which is a cool business in and of itself. So that's an awesome thing too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Tim, for being our guest this week, or our guest. I don't know if I have someone in my pocket, really my guest this week. I really enjoyed hearing about it. And I mean, I'm just a huge Office fan. And as always, as I've said, I love where I live. I'm blessed. And like Tim said, I mean, we chose to stay. And, to your point, sometimes there's that like, oh, is it a failure? You didn't leave and go to the big city. And I will say sometimes I do think about that, what could have been if I left? But I didn't. And I'm grateful and I'm blessed to have my family very close to me. My parents, my brother is out of town. So as it does happen, one stays, one leaves.
Yeah.
But I am fortunate. And I do think we are fortunate here in Scranton. So if you'd like to visit, please, we encourage you to come, Tim and I. And, there's just a lot to see and do. So we hope that you will check it out. And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Uncorked with Funny Wine Girl. And uncork something great here in Scranton, because you know what they say, ain't no party like a Scranton party, because in Scranton, the party don't stop.
Amen to that.